In the hidden valleys of West Virginia, there exists a story that the world was never meant to hear, a family cut off from the world, a family whose voices are not words but growls and grunts, their life shrouded in silence and mystery. This is the story of the Whittaker family. To step into their forgotten village is to step into a place where time has stopped, where the modern world has no meaning, and where survival has twisted into something both terrifying and tragic. The Whittakers do not live like others. Their world is one of isolation, their home falling apart with age, their lives marked by strange sounds that echo through the walls, growls, barks, and noises that strike fear and confusion into those who dare come close. Outsiders who have visited speak of the unsettling atmosphere, a silence broken only by those animal-like sounds and the empty stares of people trapped in a cycle of inbreeding poverty and solitude. Imagine walking into a village where the neighbors are gone. The streets are silent, and one lone house stands like a tomb of forgotten lives inside you. Find not just a family, but a mirror reflecting the darkest edges of human history. The Whittaker family has become a symbol of what happens when generations close themselves off from the outside world, when the bloodline folds in on itself and the past refuses to let go. This is not just a story about one family. It is a haunting reminder of what isolation does to human beings. It is a story of survival without guidance, existence without hope, and life that has become a strange echo of what humanity once was. The Whittakers of West Virginia are not only America's most infamous inbred family, they are also the guardians of a terrifying secret hidden behind their growls, their silence, and their haunted eyes. The roots of the Whittaker family stretch deep into the soil of West Virginia, a land known for its coal mines, its dense forests, and its forgotten towns. But hidden within those hills lies a family tree that twists and turns in ways that most cannot imagine. The Whittakers were not always infamous. Once they were just another poor family struggling to survive in a place where opportunities were scarce and the outside world rarely paid attention. Over the decades, isolation became their prison. The small village where they lived slowly emptied as neighbors moved away in search of work and a better life. But the Whittakers stayed behind, clinging to the only home they knew. Cut off from society and cut off from choices, their family line began to fold in on itself. Brother to sister, cousin to cousin, generation after generation. The cycle of inbreeding tightened its grip and created a family whose very existence became a dark legend, whispered about in hushed voices. Visitors who dared to approach their crumbling house described a world frozen in time. The furniture decades old, the walls scarred by poverty, the air heavy with silence. This was not just a home, but a monument to what happens when humanity is left to decay, unchallenged, unhelped, and unseen. What shocked outsiders most was not the poverty, but the strange behavior of the family members. Some could not speak. Some could only grunt and bark, their communication broken down to the most primal sounds, like echoes of something less than human, yet heartbreakingly human at the same time. The Whittakers became more than just a family. They became a riddle. How could this happen in modern America? How could an entire family live cut off from the rest of the world in the 21st century? Their story is not only about genetic collapse, it is also about neglect, about a society that turned its back on the forgotten corners of its land and allowed generations to vanish into the shadows, unseen, unheard, and misunderstood. To understand the Whittaker family, you must first understand the silence that surrounds them. This is not the silence of peace. It is the silence of isolation. The silence of being cut away from the rest of the world for generations. The Whittakers lived with no outside contact, no schools, no hospitals, no neighbors. Their only company was each other and the sounds of the hills that trapped them in their forgotten corner of West Virginia. It is in this silence that the most haunting detail emerges. Many members of the Whittaker family do not speak. Their language has been reduced to grunts, growls, and animal-like sounds that send shivers through anyone who hears them. Imagine standing in front of another human being, staring into their eyes, and hearing not words, but a deep guttural bark or a broken grunt. That is how visitors describe their encounters with Ray Whittaker, who became the most infamous figure of the family. Ray does not speak. He growls, he barks, he communicates like an echo from a world stripped of language. The silence of the Whittakers is not simply a lack of sound. It is a reflection of what happens when generations are cut off from the world, without education, without new bloodlines, without human connection. Language itself begins to crumble and vanish. This silence is heavy. It presses on anyone who dares to visit. It makes the house feel less like a home and more like a crypt, a place where words have died and only shadows remain. For outsiders, this silence is terrifying, but for the Whittakers, it is normal. It is the only life they have ever known. What seems strange to us is the fabric of their existence, a world where speech is replaced by grunts, where eye contact carries more weight than words, and where the line between human and animal blurs not by choice but by circumstance. Their silence is not their fault. It is their inheritance passed down through generations like a curse that no one ever broke. The house of the Whittaker family stands like a warning to anyone who dares to approach it. From the outside, it looks like nothing more than a decaying structure with broken windows, sagging walls, and the scars of poverty written across every corner. But when you step closer, the air changes. There is a weight that presses on you, a sense that the house itself carries the burden of decades of secrets, isolation, and pain. Inside the house, visitors describe scenes that are frozen in time, old furniture left to rot, piles of objects collected over the years, and an atmosphere so heavy it feels like stepping into another century. The rooms are dim, the air stale, the silence broken only by the unsettling noises that echo from within, those walls, growls, grunts, sudden sounds that make your heart race. You realize quickly that this is not just a home. It is a cage holding generations of people who never had a chance to escape. Ray Whittaker, the man who barks, has become the symbol of this strange world, his communication reduced to animal-like noises, his presence both frightening and tragic. He is not a monster, but a man shaped by circumstances beyond his control. When outsiders look into his eyes, they do not see madness. They see confusion, sadness, and a deep loneliness that words can never express. He is perhaps the most haunting figure of the family, a reminder of what happens when humanity is left in isolation for too long. The neighbors who once lived nearby abandoned the area long ago, and the Whittakers were left alone in their crumbling house, forgotten by society and ignored by the world around them. Their existence became a myth, a ghost story whispered in nearby towns, a story that outsiders could barely believe until they saw it with their own eyes. This house, this family, this silence. It became the dark heart of West Virginia, a place where the line between human tragedy and human horror is impossible to separate. When the world first heard about the Whittaker family, it was through the eyes of outsiders who stumbled upon their forgotten home. Journalists, filmmakers, and curious strangers all came to document what seemed too unbelievable to be real. They carried cameras and microphones expecting to uncover a bizarre spectacle. But what they found instead was a disturbing mix of tragedy and humanity that left them shaken. The most famous encounter came when a filmmaker visited their home in the early 2000s. His footage showed the world something it had never seen before. The Whittakers sitting in silence, some unable to speak, others communicating only through grunts and gestures, and Ray with his piercing stare and guttural barks. The footage went viral. It spread across television and the internet, leaving millions shocked, disturbed, and fascinated in equal measure. Suddenly, the Whittakers were no longer a hidden family. They became an international symbol of inbreeding and isolation. But with that attention came another form of cruelty. Many viewers treated the Whittakers as entertainment. They watched the videos not with compassion but with morbid curiosity, turning a family's suffering into a modern-day freak show. The Whittakers were labeled as America's most inbred family, their humanity overshadowed by the shocking way they communicated. The world looked at them through a lens of horror, without asking how they came to live like this, or why no one ever helped them escape their isolation. What outsiders often forget is that the Whittakers never chose this life. Their condition is the result of generations of neglect, poverty, and abandonment by society. They were trapped in a cycle they could not break, a cycle that turned them into a cautionary tale. But behind the viral headlines and shocking videos are real people, people who laugh, who cry, who feel loneliness and fear, just like anyone else their state. Ori forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. Are we horrified by them because of who they are, or because they remind us of what happens when humanity is forgotten? The deeper you look into the Whittaker story, the clearer it becomes that this is not just about one family in West Virginia. It is about what happens when an entire community is left behind, forgotten, and abandoned by the outside world. The Whittakers are the most extreme example, but they are not alone. Countless families across remote regions of America live in poverty, with little to no access to education, healthcare, or opportunity. When generations grow up in isolation, cut off from the progress of society, the results can be devastating. In the case of the Whittakers, inbreeding was not a choice but a consequence of geography and circumstance. They lived in a small valley surrounded by mountains with no easy way out. Over time, the family line folded in on itself. Cousins married cousins. Brothers and sisters remained under the same roof. And slowly the genetic effects began to appear, mental and physical, disabilities, speech impairments, and behaviors that set them apart from the outside world. What many dismiss as freakish is in reality the tragic outcome of years of neglect and lack of intervention. But beyond the science and history, there is a deeper layer to this story. The Whittakers are a mirror reflecting the darker side of society's values. While millions watched their videos with shock, very few asked how they could be helped or supported. The fascination was never about saving them. It was about staring at them like a living exhibit of human failure. They became symbols of horror when, in truth, they were symbols of abandonment. The tragedy of the Whittakers forces us to confront questions about humanity and morality. What do we owe to those who cannot escape their circumstances? How can we claim to be a modern, advanced society when families like this are allowed to vanish into silence and darkness without help? The story of the Whittakers is not just about inbreeding or isolation, It is about the cost of forgetting people. It is about what happens when society turns its back and leaves entire communities to survive alone in the shadows. As night falls over the forgotten hills of West Virginia, the Whittaker family home stands in silence, a broken structure holding generations of secrets within its crumbling walls. The story of this family is not just a dark curiosity. It is a haunting reminder of what happens when people are abandoned by the world, left to vanish in isolation. Their voices silenced, their lives reduced to whispers and legends. Ray Whittaker, the man who barks, has become the face of this story, his guttural sounds echoing like a cry that no one can translate, a sound that speaks of loneliness, confusion, and a desperate attempt to connect with a world that never listened. His life is both tragic and symbolic, A reminder that behind every shocking headline, there is a human being with feelings, with a history, and with pain that can never be fully understood by outsiders. The Whittakers may be seen by many as America's most inbred family, but that label hides the deeper truth. They are victims of a system that failed them, a society that turned away while they were trapped in poverty and isolation. They were turned into a spectacle when what they needed was compassion. Their story forces us to ask what it means to be human. Is it our ability to speak, to learn to adapt, or is it our ability to care for one another? When people look into the eyes of the Whittakers, they see something that unsettles them. It is not just the strangeness of their condition, but the reflection of something deeper. They are a mirror of neglect, a warning of what happens when humanity forgets its own, when you strip away the shock and the mystery. What remains is a family who never chose their fate, a family whose silence speaks louder than any words ever could, and as the camera turns away, as the world once again forgets their existence, their story lingers like a shadow in the mind of anyone who dares to look too closely. The Whittakers are not just a family, they are a question, a wound, and a truth that cannot be buried, no matter how much society wants to look away.